Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me on the Sutherland Report and for another wonderful interview with another Reform UK candidate. I will be bringing on Kabeer, Kher, and he can explain the constituency, where it is, where he is standing, and then we will go from there and find out what he is about and what he's up to. So thank you. Kabeer, thank you so much for joining me. It's a real pleasure to meet you via this digital medium. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
I'm just going to put the glasses on and let's go through a few maps, because one of the wonderful things about this, as I'm interviewing a few people, is that we need to explain our wonderful country, our wonderful union, and where all various constituents are. So I will start off with putting the UK in people's minds. We will be below Sheffield, and Kabeer, you can then explain where we are, and it's really important I get that right.
Yes. So, yeah, that's us right in the sort of what I like to refer to as the bum cheek of England, which is kind of Norfolk and Suffolk, and that's Norfolk right at the top there, and my constituency, Midnorfolk, is obviously right by smack bang in the middle of.
Well, I've got the little constituency map, so I'll find that.
That's us.
So
right
there you are.
Yeah, so we're just to the west of Norwich. But yeah, we've got great links to Norwich and Cambridge, and not too far from Ipswich, so it's well located right in the centre of East Anglia.
And mentioning Norwich, Cambridge, so Kabeer, what has drawn you to this constituency? What has drawn you to this party? Let's go from there, please, sir.
Yeah, well, if I start with the second question first, I mean, Reform UK, really the moment for me was when Rishi Sunak decided to ban shale gas in the middle of an energy crisis. I really absolutely had enough. Up until then, I had been a member of the Conservative Party, and I just decided that the time had come for me to get involved, and so I started looking for a new party, and very quickly found Reform UK. Went through the policies and found I absolutely agreed with every single one of them. It's largely based around individual freedom. It's based around economic growth. It's based around strong public services. And some common sense solutions for problems which seem to have been facing this country for several years now, which nobody seems to be making any headway with, and seem to be getting worse. And so the more I read, the more I fell in love with the party, and joined and became the candidate for Midnorfolk last year, and ever since then, the feedback on the ground has been phenomenal. There's been so much positivity. In the early days, obviously, there wasn't as much name recognition. I think that's changed now. We're a lot more well known with people when I'm on the doorstep. And so there's a lot of excitement about the party. There's a lot of excitement about our ideas. And so it's just a great place to be.
So what are you meeting on the doorstep? You're describing that excitement, which is fantastic. Could you contextualize it more? Can you explain more about that, the reactions you're getting and some of the things people are saying?
So it's everything from, veterans to people who work in the farming community, to people who have struggled with mental health issues. There's a real movement happening on the right of politics, where lots of people who've just been forgotten for many years are now finding the resources they need online to learn about really how the world works and about personal development. And so just to give you one example, there was a young man I spoke to last week who just he got the leaflet through the door and just ran out of his house to come down to meet me and chat to me. And the first thing he said to me was about all the mental health issues he'd been struggling with, and how he'd found Jordan Peterson online, and the values that he'd learned from Jordan Peterson about personal responsibility had just completely changed his entire worldview. And listening to that advice brought him out of his depression and stress and anxiety that he'd been facing. And this was opening him up to a new way of thinking, which was about personal responsibility and individual freedoms. And that was now changing his politics in terms of who he would support, from formerly being a very sort of left winger to now being someone who was looking at parties like Reform. And so, you know, the excitement was palpable. It's a story I've heard time and time again, even with friends of mine who've suffered with depression. And when they've found the party and our outlook in life and people who support parties like ours, it's totally changed the way they feel about the world, and it's enabling them to feel empowered to change their lives and the lives of people around them. And, you know, for some, it's not as much excitement, it's more anger about what's being done to the country and the way it's been changed without our consent. And, you know, and they see Reform as being the only party that's really different from the Westminster blob, you know, because largely Labour, Lib Dem and Conservatives are very much of the same, have become very much of the same ideology, which is a kind of centrist managed decline of this country that doesn't have any self-belief in what this country is capable of.
That is so encouraging to hear when you're describing someone who seems to move from a collectivist mindset to an individualist mindset, and then fully understanding that and taking responsibility for that. So what are the main issues that are affecting your constituencies? An area I do know of, but what are the main issues within the Midnorfolk constituency and then in Norfolk? And of course, because of all of that will spill out to the constituents around it. What are the main concerns?
So there's a number of concerns. Obviously, there's national concerns which affect everyone, but there are some, you know, big problems that are specific to Midnorfolk. One of the most pressing issues which has affected me personally is flooding. Last year, we've obviously had, you know, horrendous rain. It really didn't stop raining all year. And, you know, the 6 months before and the 6 months since, you know, or the 5 months since have been largely very similar. And so there has been a lot of flooding in Midnorfolk. And, you know, that has affected me personally because my parents were actually flooded out of their home autumn last year, October last year. And the reason was because of a housing development at the bottom of their street, which was being built on a floodplain. Now, the local council had denied planning permission for this housing development because it was a floodplain, but they had been overruled by the National Planning Inspectorate. And really, when you get into the root cause analysis of this, you find that, you know, local councils know where they can and can't build houses, but nationally there is this drive for immigration, and therefore we need more housing, and so they have these, you know, massive targets for house building, which we're not even meeting, and so that is why the National Planning Inspectorate are going around overruling local councils when it comes to house building in order to try and meet the demand for housing, which is just increasing exponentially, and that's how you end up then with building sites causing huge flooding problems, as happened in Attleborough and Mid-Norfolk. And you know, immigration really is one of the key drivers of that, because without the net migration of 725,000 a year, we wouldn't need to be finding more housing so urgently, and we wouldn't need to be building in floodplains. So that's what's affecting Attleborough. We've also got obviously huge issues with healthcare. Again, towns like Watton have expanded so quickly with the migrants that have moved there. A couple of years ago, we saw 1,500 people thrown off the GP register in Watton and Mid-Norfolk because there just simply wasn't enough GPs to service the expanding population of the town. In Attleborough, we've got 4,000 homes set to be built. Planning permission has been approved, but no confirmation that there's going to be another GP surgery for Attleborough to service those homes. So that's healthcare is a huge issue. And then the third sort of key issue in this constituency is actually air pollution. Now, somewhere like Midnorfolk is probably the last place you would expect to have an issue with air pollution. You think of cities like London, but some of the food processing sites, like the one in Stow-Beedon, have been causing absolute misery for the residents there. They've been pumping out ammonia into the air, and some of these villages are sitting in valleys, like particularly Stow-Beedon, and that ammonia is sitting in the valley and causing huge health issues for residents there. Unfortunately, the environment issues seem to be more interested in saving bats and newts than they do in alleviating the air quality for people. And so the priorities of the Environment Agency are just completely upside down. They need to be much more focused on a cleaner environment for people to enjoy. And when it comes to infrastructure, that means investing in sewage treatment works and different things to enable people to live a healthier lifestyle. That will sometimes mean displacing bats and newts. And that, unfortunately, that's going to have to take a second order priority to making sure that the infrastructure is there that people need, and they've got their priorities upside down.
Thank you, Kabeer. You are really on it. You are really on it. No, it's wonderful. That is a compliment, because people want to hear the fact that you know what's happening within your constituency. The floodplains, a very good point, not a good place to build on. So you're talking about a national issue, quite rightly. We have to talk about that, which is the strain via immigration. You've then covered the strain on GP services, etc. What are hospitals? Are you saying you don't have enough hospital facilities? Are there more hospitals that need to be built? They are overrun with the amount of demands. What are your comments in regard to that?
Yeah, so I know quite a fair bit about the situation with hospitals, because my wife actually works in the NHS, and she's worked in 2 different hospitals in Norfolk. And what we've seen in Norfolk is there have been some improvements. I think historically Norwich has suffered with the level of service from the hospital there. It has been starting to improve, just through common sense things. Like, I'll give you one example. So obviously the A&E waiting times are off the scale as they are in most cities. In the Norfolk and Norwich, what they've started to do is do some common sense things like having an actual doctor run triage. So in the past, you would go to A&E, you'd turn up a triage, they'd kind of decide how urgent your priority was, and then you'd be made to wait. But by actually having a doctor in the triage, they can, quite often they can say, you don't need to be here, do this, do that, and go away. Because a lot of these issues that turn up in A&E are people that just aren't sure. They're just not quite sure. Maybe they need to be there, maybe they're not, maybe they don't. And so they're going to A&E because they're not sure. And just a doctor being able to reassure them means they can go away. I'll give you an example. When my daughter was, this was obviously a decade ago, when my daughter was 6 months old, she managed to get her hands on her nappy cream and swallowed half a tub of nappy cream. Now, as new parents, we were obviously, really panicked about this, but this was not something that was worrying any doctor. Once we spoke to them, they were able to sort of look at the label and say it's non-toxic. And those are the kind of things that are, people are turning up in A&E because they don't have access to GP services out of hours. And so they turn up at A&E, and actually that's something that's very easily to solve and basically send people away and take pressure off. So there isn't enough common sense in the way that we deliver health services. There's far too much bureaucracy, and there's just not enough. There's not enough trained doctors, quite frankly, and I think that is largely because of the cap that the government places on the amount of doctors that can be trained. I think it's also not helped by the degree requirements for nursing, and they need to bring in a lot more apprenticeships for nurses. So we're suffering from a lot of the same issues that are affecting everyone nationally, which is just a lack of doctors, a lack of nurses. And if we can fix that and bring some common sense and also just some choice treat patients like customers rather than a cost of doing business. If we treat them like customers and get people seen quickly, someone that is seen quickly and seen early in the long run will generally cost the health service a lot less than someone who's seen late because they've been sat on a waiting list while their conditions worsen. So those are the kind of things that we are prioritizing as Reform UK, getting the waiting list down to as close to zero as possible, and that will improve the lives of people, and in the long run will reduce costs for the health service, because you're getting people seen early and not letting them languish and have their conditions worsen.
One of the wonderful things about doing these interviews and meeting people around the country is when I'm asking them that, and you've answered that brilliantly, of course, they are then personalizing those concerns, those needs to their individual constituencies, which I think is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that is what has frustrated people, because it isn't one size fits all in one sense, but there are national things that are affecting people, and immigration is one. And you raise a wonderful point in the fact that your wife works in hospitals as a nurse, etc., and is observing all these things, and also the bureaucracy. Is there any other, what's employment like? What's unemployment like within the area? You raised this interesting thing about air quality in regard to these factories. I hope that can be addressed. What about getting other industry in, other jobs in the mixed economy, as you quite rightly said, farming community?
Yeah, so unemployment in the region is generally quite low. It's not too bad. I think that there is an issue for self-employed people. People who have small businesses have really struggled with the cost of bureaucracy, and I think one of the ways that we can help them is by taking away business rates completely for small and medium-sized businesses. I know that the Conservatives have tried to kind of bring in these temporary business rate holidays, but for me, that's not good enough, because it doesn't give people the certainty they need to plan for the future. And if you're going to grow a business, you need that certainty. Again, just give you an example from when I started my business. I had a business several years ago, which I started, which is a gourmet burger restaurant in Northern Ireland. And one of the most decisive factors when choosing a location was business rates. So I looked at a location in Portstewart, which was the north coast of Northern Ireland, versus one in Coleraine. And the difference in business rates was £4,000 a year versus £30,000 a year, which is absolutely enormous. Now, there's no way, when you're paying rent of £30,000 a year and then rates of £30,000 a year, that's 60 grand a year out the door before you've even traded for one day. And that makes life very difficult for people who are trying to build a business and expand. And so there needs to be much more focus on small and medium-sized businesses. Our policy in Reform UK is to completely scrap business rates, to level the playing field between online and the high street. That will help to resurrect the high street, and that will hopefully, bring about a revival on our high streets, because the high streets in Midnorfolk and towns like Attleborough, Dereham, Wotton is really struggling. There are many shops in those high streets which are empty, and might not be occupied for a very long time, and that's just a waste, in my opinion. It's a total waste of the infrastructure that's already there, and it's dampening down the opportunities for our young people, who many of whom are extremely ambitious, that yes, they can support these businesses with their online trade, and many do. Like, for example, there's a great success story in Attleborough called Bakeaholics. It's a new bakery which has opened up in Attleborough. They've expanded to Norwich, and now they're going nationwide using online delivery, and that's been great. We need to see more of those success stories, and largely those businesses do start with the premises, and so those business rates are a killer. If we can get rid of those, that will enable more businesses to start, and if they can expand online, then that's only going to be great for the future prospects of this country.
What a wonderful example. They'll have to, maybe they can be a future sponsor. I'll have to talk to them, but we've just given them a shout out. But the positive thing about what you're saying. Again, young people, they want to, there is a lot of energy, aspiration, they want to give it a go. It's giving them that opportunity. Business rates, absolutely, that is a business killer in so many areas. What about school places? Is there a strain on schooling? Are class sizes of a size they're too big within the public sector? Where are schools at, and the teachers, etc., etc.?
So we're very lucky in Mid Norfolk. We do have some excellent schools. So there's one school in particular, Wyndham College, which is in the Mid Norfolk constituency. It is the best state school, best performing state school in the whole of Norfolk. However, Wyndham College is actually a state boarding school which accepts some day pupils. So they're not taking any huge amount of pupils. They are exceptional. The Ofsted rating is 1, outstanding, but there's many other schools in Norfolk which are falling below that standard. Now, the academy that runs Wyndham College has also taken over some other schools like Attleborough Academy, and so our hope is that those good practices from Wyndham College will expand out across the constituency. So we will see improving standards. In terms of places, there hasn't actually been an issue with school places in Mid Norfolk. We've seen a new school built in Attleborough. We've seen another new primary school built on the site of Wyndham College itself. I know the school that my children used to go to, Morley Primary Church of England. They have actually struggled to get enough pupils. So the capacity is there for what we need. That's not an issue in Mid Norfolk. What we need to focus on now is raising the standards and empowering teachers with, and more importantly, I think, empowering head teachers with the ability to instill discipline in the classroom. That is one of the things that's going to make the biggest difference to education in this country. I listen to Catherine Burblesing a lot, who's online now doing interviews. She's on Twitter, and she talks a lot about what works in her school, which is famously had the documentary The Strictest School in Britain. And I think a lot of those practices about respect and, yes, tolerance, but also treating people equally across the board, not making special victim categories, but treating everybody the same. That's really important, and that's very much aligned with our values as a party. And I think a lot of schools could do well to learn the lessons from her.
Kabeer, thank you. What about, following on from what you were saying about that, the bakery business, then its successful online business? What about infrastructure in regard to the internet, cabling, fiber, speed of that? Is that in a good place within Mid Norfolk, or within Norfolk?
Broadband, yes. So fiber to the premises has been made available. I think the biggest issue we're facing is with 3G, 4G, and 5G. There's a real lack of 4G in many villages. In fact, on Saturday, I was knocking on doors and doing leaflets in Stowbeedon, which is a village in Mid Norfolk, and there we couldn't get 4G once anywhere in the village. It was hugely difficult. Myself and my friend, we were trying to coordinate which streets we were doing, and we couldn't call each other. At one stage, my wife and my son were coming to help. We couldn't call them. We couldn't even WhatsApp each other. We kind of went back to old-fashioned SMS, and we were getting messages through, every 10 minutes. So God help the people that actually live there, trying to run a mobile business or trying to do anything that, is outside of their home. They would really struggle for reception. And there's many villages like that throughout Mid Norfolk. Besthorpe is another one. And so I think from a broadband point of view, Mid Norfolk has been great. And my wife was actually involved in getting fibre to the premises of Morley Primary School when she used to work for British Telecom. And so I've seen the fibre to the premises has been enabled in many towns and villages. And that's been great, but we need to see a lot more mobile infrastructure go in so that, we're not seeing the economy held back.
So, Kabeer, no, thank you. It's just a wonderful overview of that. So, Could you explain? You've been, I think you've just been walking quite a lot over the last few days. Could you explain your campaign, what you've been doing, how you're getting out and meeting people, leafleting, etc.? The whole structure of what you're doing.
Yeah, so we started off the campaign several months ago with some Talking Pints events, just obviously taking inspiration from Nigel Farage and GB News. Just, you know, the idea of just meeting people in the pub to talk politics, I think is a great idea. And so what we've started off with was just contacting the local members, asking them to invite some friends along, so we could gather up an army of supporters, if you like, so that we can then go out and promote some more events. So we did that at the start of the year. Now we're into going out to the villages and doing presentations. I've made a conscious decision to start with all the villages first, because I think in a lot of election campaigns, especially in Midnorfolk, people focus in the big towns like Attleborough, Dereham and Wotton, and they focus less on the smaller villages like Ling and Hingham. And so that's two of the villages that we're going to do a presentation where we're going to campaign. I've been basically hitting the streets around Midnorfolk to invite people to come along to hear the draft manifesto, where I'm going to present it over an hour, and then they can ask questions. One of the best things about Reform UK is most of our leadership team have worked in business, and so they treat everything like a business. And in business, you don't just come along and say, here's the plan and this is what we're going to do. What you do is you issue a draft plan, and then you take feedback from all of the key stakeholders to improve that plan before you then finalize it. And that's exactly what we're doing with our manifesto. So we've got this draft manifesto, which we're all presenting around the country, and I'm doing it in the villages first, to make sure that no one is left behind and everyone gets an opportunity to hear it. And then we're going to take feedback from people to improve that manifesto. And then once the general election is officially called, then we can finalize the final manifesto, which we then put to people for the vote. So it's been hugely exciting. I've clocked up about 51,000 steps last weekend. We've set a high bar now, which we need to, me and my friends need to beat to try and get all those leaflets out. But we've got the materials, we've got the volunteers, we're ready to go, and we're just hitting it every week now, trying to get the message out to as many people as possible. And the excitement's building, and the sunshine helps as well, which those cold nights in the winter were difficult, but yeah, we've got the momentum now. We're making progress, and we're getting the word out.
Brilliant. Kabeer, thank you. Where can people contact you? Where can they best reach out to you about their concerns, how they can get involved, etc.?
So I'm on Facebook on Reform UK Midnorfolk. I'm on Twitter as Reform UK Midnorfolk or at Kher Kabeer. And I've got a website, which is kabeerkher.com. So those are the three main places. Obviously, people can email me at midnorfolk@reformuk.com. And so all of that information is on the website. So the website, kabeerkher.com, will have all the links to all the social media sites. And yeah, we get lots of messages on Facebook and Twitter and via email. Obviously, if you sign up, if you're in Midnorfolk and you sign up to Reform UK, then you'll automatically get the mailing list, which I send out on a regular basis. And yeah, but obviously, I do get from time to time people just sending me messages on Facebook as well. So if you don't want your comment to be seen publicly, then you can use that Facebook Messenger as well. So there's lots of people who seem to be finding us easily. But if anybody's not sure, I think kabeerkher.com is the place to start.
Brilliant. Kabeer, thank you. Before we go, and I'll just thank you for a great conversation, is there anything else that you would like to say that you don't think you've covered? Think about the fact that if you've knocked on someone's door, what would your pitch be for a couple of minutes? What things would you, when they say to you, why should we vote for you? What would you say?
So there's two things. So first of all, I'm conscious I'd never answered the first part of your question earlier, which was how did I end up in Midnorfolk? So I just want to kind of give people a bit of background about me, where I came from. So yeah, I grew up in Northern Ireland, as most people will probably have guessed. Grew up above a pub, actually. I studied international business and economics in university in Glasgow. I started my career in British Telecom, which is where I met my wife. Later in life, my father developed some health problems, which is how I ended up running the family business and then starting my own business on the side of that. And then eventually my wife and I decided that for childcare reasons, it was better to be near her family in Midnorfolk, which is where she grew up. And so we've ended up here for childcare reasons, and I've been working in financial services since I moved here in 2015. So that's how I ended up in Midnorfolk. I think with most men, quite often the wife takes priority when it comes to deciding where to bring up the kids, and that's how it's been for us. So we're very happy here. And my parents and my sister have also moved here now, and she started her family. So both sides of our family now are well settled here. In terms of the doorstep, I think the key thing that I'm trying to get across to people is, those traditional values of conservatism around individual freedom, personal responsibility, and economic growth to support strong public services. Those values have been completely forgotten by the Conservative Party. We are now the party that represents those traditional working values. And we are attracting people from all sides, not just former Conservatives. We've got many candidates who used to be Labour Party members and Labour Party candidates. And we've got many supporters in the working class communities, and a lot of excitement amongst young people, actually, which has really surprised me. I knew that we would be popular amongst the older generation, but I've been surprised at how much support we've had from young people. So, and it is, I think, the new trend about personal responsibility and self-help that is sweeping the internet, really. And what people are finding is, that they can solve their own problems far better than the government can. All they need is that little bit of education and empowerment. And so we want to give people back the freedom to do that. And that means, as has been done many times before, rolling back the state in order to give people that freedom they need to help them solve problems, and supporting them with education rather than throwing money at every problem, which tends to not solve the problem.
Kabeer, thank you so much. And I'm just gonna put the map up again of your constituency so we can celebrate that. And there we are in that incredible region of our beautiful country. So thank you, Kabeer. I just want to thank you for joining me, and I will play us out very, very shortly. Thank you for mentioning where people can where they can contact you. So thank you very much indeed for joining me on the Southern Report. I'll just give you another few seconds. If there anything else you want to say, if you feel as though you've covered it.
No, just thank you, Mark, for taking the time and for reaching out to do this interview. It's been really enjoyable. It's not often we get the chance to really kind of fully explain where we're coming from. I'm very much a believer in nuance. The world isn't black or white. It's all about the greys. And just having the time to actually explain where I'm coming from is really important to me. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, and I wish you every success with your podcast.
Thank you very much indeed, because what that is to give people an opportunity to speak and explain, and the fact that we have to use this medium in which to do that. We don't know when the election is going to be called at all, but we've got to be ready. And thank you for. Sounds as though you have really hit the ground running. So I salute you for that, sir. Thank you. Thank you for joining us on the Southern Report. Please click like, subscribe, follow. I will be very indebted. Kabeer, thank you once again. I'm going to play us out. Please join me on the other side too, and I'll say goodbye. Thank you.